Hello everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to the channel. I am here today with my March 2020 book wrap-up. So these are all the books that I read in the month of March. Now I will do a media wrap-up, so I'll talk about the movies and the video games that I played in the month of March as well, but that's going to be in a separate video just to kind of keep it a little bit shorter. So today is just going to be a discussion about the 8 books that I read in March. So without further ado, let's dive right in. First up is a book from 1977, and this is a Stephen King book called The Shining. So this one I actually did a complete book versus movie on for the channel, so definitely check that out if you're interested. But I do own the physical copy of this. I did read it via my Audible audiobook version, and so but just to have something to hold, I decided to bring this down. So I'm sure everyone knows what The Shining's about. This group of 3, a man, a wife, and their child, move into the Overlook, which is a gigantic hotel that is clearly haunted, and they are locked in there for the winter, and weird things start happening. So obviously, I'm not going to go much further than that. Everyone knows what The Shining's about, but this is a really, really well done book. It is not my favorite Stephen King book, but it is really good. There are parts in here that feel like they could be cut out a little bit to help with the pacing a bit, but even that said, I really enjoyed this. I won't say too much just because I did a complete book versus movie where I talk about my thoughts on both this and the miniseries from 1992 or 94, I forget, I think 94. So check that out if you want to know kind of my more elaborate thoughts on this book. So The Shining by Stephen King was the first book I read in March, and I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was also on audiobook thanks to the version I own on Audible, and it was from 1985, The Handmaid's Tale, written by Margaret Atwood. So in The Handmaid's Tale, we follow the story of the handmaid. Her name is Offred. It's Offred. I think it's like of Fred is where the origin stems from. But so she is the titular handmaid. And we are essentially following like journal entries, or not literally like written journal entries, but I don't know. She's recapping it somehow, and we are finding this years after the fact. And so basically what has happened is America specifically has turned into this, what is supposed to be like a utopian society, but in reality it is a dystopian society where women are only valued if they are able to make babies, essentially. So they're valued for their ovaries. And you have a choice as a woman to either become a handmaid or a number of other choices. One of them is essentially like a prostitute. But either way, she decides that she's going to do this handmaid's gig. That's a terrible way to describe it, but that's what she decides to do. And so she's able to walk outside once a day to go grocery shopping for her commander, is what he's called, like the male leader of the house. And then she has to have sex with him once a month in order to have a baby. And, if you are a handmaid, what you really want is to have a baby, because then you are respected, and it's kind of like a safety thing as well. Once you're pregnant, then they know you're worthwhile, so they won't like toss you out and kill you, essentially. So having a child, like becoming pregnant, is very important in this society among these handmaids. Offred is of an age that she remembers what life was like before this whole change happened. And so we follow, some like reminiscences, backs and flashbacks to when she was a free woman, just a free person like anybody else. She had a husband, she had a child, but now she is stuck in this mundane and frankly terrible life as a handmaid. And so the whole story is just following her story. Now, I had some problems with this one, and I will preface this by saying virtually everyone that reads this thinks it is a classic of literature, and I totally respect that. I liked Atwood's writing style, but the story left a lot to be desired for me. I didn't really enjoy it that much. The story doesn't really ever go into why why these handmaids exist and why the society is set up in this way, so I thought that was disappointing. I kept expecting that to come in and kind of learning more about the history, the background, but then I reached like the 50% mark, and then finally the 75% mark, and I realized, man, this just isn't really going to talk about it much, and it never really does. And then the ending, which I'm not going to spoil at all, but I will say that I was severely let down by the ending, and I wasn't... There's not a twist by any stretch, but it's you find out that this is, something that you're reading after the fact, which of course it's something you're reading after the fact. It's a journal entry. So obviously we're reading it after this person's already written it or recorded it or whatever it is, however it is that they've cataloged this history. Obviously it's after it's already happened, given the nature of it, which I talked about in another book I read recently, which, I can't remember what book it was, but that's going to kill me. I can't remember, but it was the same thing where it's obviously we know that this person's going to be okay because they've just talked about what has happened. And so some of the tension gets, The Martian, that's what it was with The Martian. Some of the tension is lost because I know that they're okay because they're writing this or they're recording this or whatever the case is. So Handmaid's Tale for me was not the classic that I hoped it to be. It didn't hit me in the way that I hoped a modern classic would. That said, definitely give it a shot because almost everyone, if you look at Goodreads, it is so highly regarded, and the majority of my friends that I follow on there love this story of The Handmaid's Tale. So check it out if it sounds like something that might be interesting to you. But for me, it just didn't really do it for me. So I gave The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood 2.5 out of 5 stars. Next up is another dystopian novel that is supposed to be a utopia, and this is from 1932, and it is Brave New World. And so this is going to be really the first classic, like bona fide classic that I've read this year, I believe. And so I was really excited to read this one because I've heard so much about it. And this is another one that it was a good book. I appreciate it for what it is. I respect it for what it is. I think the idea of the book is so vast and so interesting that it kind of had my attention there. But in terms of the characters and like any of the kind of basically the characters themselves, the story arc of the characters, I just didn't really care too much about. I was never invested in what the outcome of these characters' lives would be at all. So Brave New World, we are following the story of this, essentially what it is this couple or this man and woman live in this world state city of London. And so the world state it's kind of just how it sounds. It's like the whole world is one state. It's all like governed by one ruling body, essentially. But there are some places apparently that are not under this world state. Like there is New Mexico, which is they call it a savage reservation. And it's a kind of like an Indian reservation of sorts. So in this world state, humans are genetically bred and then given pharmaceuticals to, they're sterile. They aren't making children. They are, that's one thing. Like basically if you are not sexually promiscuous, you are weird. Like that's strange. Like they talk about how everyone needs to have multiple partners all the time and just kind of never stop doing that. And that's, hey, it is what it is. But that's the world state that people live in. But anyway, so these people are, like I said, genetically bred, and they're cloned by the thousands, and they don't age like you and I do. They don't breed like you and I do. They are just very sterile beings. We follow this couple as they travel to New Mexico, like I was saying, on the Savage Resort, which again is basically just an Indian reservation. And they find the people that live like you and I do now. We breed, we age, we disease, and then we die. Hopefully in that order. And so basically they're mesmerized by this. They are dumbfounded by watching these people live like you and I live now. And so they actually run into someone who is from the world state. She ventured there on a trip of some sort and got separated from her group and just ended up stuck there. She eventually becomes pregnant with one of the reservationists' babies. And so she just lives her life there. Well, they decide to take her and her son back to the world state, which of course makes them celebrities. And it's just this whole to-do about what's going on. And then they see how these people, the world state people see how these Indian or savage reservationists live. And that starts challenging some of the ideas of the time. So that was a dreadful summary of the plot, but I'm going to be honest with you, I had a very difficult time following this one. I actually had to read the Wikipedia or like it might have been Spark Notes after I finished it to make sure I was really understanding what was going on. So that was quite difficult for me to follow. I did end up giving Brave New World by Aldous Huxley 3 out of 5 stars. So I did give it a half a star higher than The Handmaid's Tale. And I think that's just because of One, the respect I have for the book, the fact that Huxley was making all these predictions like cloning, and they have this thing called sleep learning. All these different things that eventually came not necessarily true in the way he predicted them or talked about them, but in a sense have now come to fruition, is just fascinating to me. And so I respect the author and the ideas of the book. And so I think that's why I ended up giving it 3 stars. But other than that, in terms of, like I said, the character and the plot, that was kind of lost on me. So, this is another one that's a classic. A lot of people really enjoy it, but I only really wanted to read this because I want to read 1984. And so I figured I better read this one first because they're often compared. And so I wanted to do the one first that came out first and then move on to 1984. So like I said, I'm going to give Aldous Huxley's Brave New World 3 out of 5 stars. So next up is the first of 2 different graphic novels I read this past month, and the first one is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Volume 1, Change is Constant, and this is written by Kevin Eastman, and then art is by Tom Waltz and Dan Duncan. So this is the IDW reboot series from 2012, and it's the first time I've ever read it. And this volume is very short. It only contains the first 4 issues, and really the first 4 issues are simply like all of the turtles coming together finally by the end of the series of this volume. So I forget which turtle it is, but one of the turtles gets separated basically when they are, so obviously this is going to like reboot the origin story. So they are separated at a young age before they actually become these like living, breathing, talking, walking creatures. Splinter knows that there is a 4th brother here, but the other 3 they've never seen him that they remember, and so they're not quite as sure. But every night they go out and search for him, and eventually they realize, man, this seems like it's all in vain. Why are we doing this? Let's do something else. But then, of course, obviously they're all going to come together. It's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's not a spoiler. So yeah, so this one I enjoyed, but it was just so much of setup that I didn't really have anything to sink my teeth into whatsoever. So I'm only giving the volume 1 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's not bad. And I'm sure if I had more volumes, I would appreciate these first 4 issues more. But just as a standalone volume, it's fine. It's just, there's not much going on here. So the art looks really cool. I guess I should show some pictures, but yeah, overall, other than the art being really good, it's just kind of okay. So I gave Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Volume 1, Change is Constant, 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up is the first of 2 Audible originals I listened to in the month of March. Obviously, I listen to normally a ton of audiobooks each month, and lengthy ones, or normal-sized ones, I guess I should say. But given the new situation, which I've already talked about multiple times, I went from driving 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, down to driving 2 hours a week, once a week. And so my audiobook consumption is much, much smaller than it was previously. So in order to try to find something that would fit into that one day, I started looking at my Audible original collection on Audible. And one that popped up was a true crime story. And this one is called Blood Territory. And it was written by Mark Whitaker from 2019. So this is only about 2 hours in length, and it's a true crime story, but I enjoyed this. I think what was most fascinating about this story, so this tells the tale of, I believe it's an Australian man who is accused of killing his best friend. And Audible original starts off by believing that this man is innocent and trying to figure out if he is. And so I guess this is a spoiler, but it's a true crime story, so is it really a spoiler? I don't know. But if you don't want to know kind of the outcome of the Audible original, then just go ahead and skip ahead here. But if you don't care, I will say that what makes this one interesting to me was the fact that it didn't end on the author trying to convince the listener, in this case, or the reader, of the guilty man's innocence. And so I thought that was really interesting because he goes through and takes all the facts and then determines, you know what? This guy probably did this murder. And so I thought that was really cool and really interesting. And not cool that not cool that it's not one of those, because I love those stories. I don't love them. They drive me batty, but like, I think those stories are so fascinating of listening to people that were put in prison when they really shouldn't have been, because it's just terrible. And so I like listening to those stories and trying to figure out, do I believe he's innocent or guilty? And this is the first one that I think, yeah, this guy was probably guilty. I agree with the author on this one. And I don't know. So the story setup is very much that this is going to be a story of a wrongfully accused man, but it doesn't go that way at all, which is kind of the main thing that kept this interesting for me, because as I was going through it, I'm just thinking, man, like, how is he going to convince me that he's innocent? Because I'm getting, further and further along in the book, and it's like, I just kept thinking to myself, this guy has not shown me anything that I can point to and say, yes, this is the smoking gun of innocence. And then as I continue and finish it, I realized, oh, that's because he didn't find that. And so I thought that part was pretty interesting. One thing I will mention, if accents give you an issue, there were very deep Australian accents in this, and sometimes I had to either rewind it or just kind of pick it up in context on what was actually being spoken or what was being said. So just something to keep in mind, not any fault, it's just the way these individuals talk because it's where they're from. So I ended up giving Blood Territory by Mark Whitman 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's Mark Whitaker, not Whitman, but you know what I mean. The second graphic novel I consumed in the month of March was The Wicked and the Divine Deluxe Edition Book 2. So this contains issues 12 through 22 and was released in 2017. So I'm not going to say a whole lot here because I will not. I refuse to spoil book 1 of this, which was, of course, issues 1 through 11. That story just blew my mind. And then issues 12, so I guess what would be volume 3. So like issues maybe 12, 13, 14, and 15. Probably 16, I think. Those issues were really odd because they were drawn by different people. There was one issue in there that I thought was just incredible. I think number 14. I believe it was 14 that I tweeted and I said, this was probably the best issue of this series yet. I loved it. And then from there, it kind of went downhill a little bit in the middle, but then it picks up again as you get into the last 2 or 3 issues. So this is another one where I loved it. I don't think it was quite as strong as the first deluxe edition, so the first 11 issues, but it's still excellent, and I absolutely want to read book 3. So if you don't know what this one's about at all, basically it's about these gods that come to Earth. They inhabit the bodies of young people. These young people then become celebrities, essentially, with some people loving them, some people hating them, and then after 2 years, they die. And so that's essentially what the story is about. Do not read Deluxe Edition Book 2 without reading Deluxe Edition Book 1 because you won't know what's going on. But if you have read Edition 1, definitely check out the second book because it is excellent. Like I said, I probably enjoyed the first 11 issues just a touch more. But that said, I think Book 2 does have the best issue in the entire series so far. So once these libraries open back up, I will absolutely be moving on to Book 3. So I gave The Wicked and the Divine Deluxe Edition Book 2 4 out of 5 stars. So the second Audible original I picked up in the month of March is a book called The Adventures of Tom Stranger, Interdimensional Insurance Agent, and it was written by Larry Correia. I had to pull it up on my computer because I couldn't remember the name of the book because it's so weird. But so this is exactly what it sounds like. Like we are introduced to Tom Stranger, who is obviously in this world there is interdimensional travel and all these crazy disasters that happen. And so Tom Stranger is an interdimensional insurance agent. And so we follow him as he's trying to take on this new, not protege, but like a sidekick essentially. And he's given the wrong person in the first go. And so this guy is like real scared, and Tom Stranger is just like superhuman, has super strength and travels through all these worlds. He's like crazy. So what this is a comedy sci-fi, science fiction comedy story. I'll admit I laughed out loud a couple times as I was listening to this, but really there's just so much in here that it feels like the author is trying so hard to like own the libs, as they might say. He has a lot of jokes. Obviously the author, or I don't know if he is or not, but the character he's writing is obviously very conservative. And so he has all these jokes, calling Obama has a what's his name? A Marx bobblehead on his desk, like just small things like that. I don't know. I can't remember now because it's been a number of weeks since I've listened to it, but there was just a number of items where he's clearly calling out liberals. What I thought was most kind of annoying about this is the fact that, well, one, I'm listening to it in 2020. I didn't realize, but the book was actually released in 2016, but the references he makes, like he has Occupy Wall Street references in here, like multiple times. It makes fun of people for having a gender studies degree, all this stuff. But anyway, most of the references he makes, they feel like they're from like 2009, 2010. And so I'm wondering, like, how long did it take to write this? Because these references are out of date, even if I was listening to it the day it came out in 2016. So I don't know. If you like sci-fi comedy and you can get this for free like I did, you might want to check it out. But honestly, I didn't like it that much at all. There is a sequel to this, which I actually just picked up because it was another Audible original. I honestly don't know if I'll listen to it because this one was so meh. I laughed, like I said, a couple times, but other than that, it's very forgettable. So I gave The Adventures of Tom Stranger, Interdimensional Insurance Agent by Larry Correia. God, that is such a mouthful. Anyway, I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. And last but not least, the book I am so thrilled that I got through in the month of March is good old Murder, She Wrote. Book number 1, Gin and Daggers. And this was written by Donald Bain. And of course, by Jessica Fletcher as well. So this was one that I was so excited to get to, and I was so charmed by it. I was just kind of blown away by that fact. I am going to do a complete review, a separate video review on this, so I won't give away too many of my spoilers here. I will talk about my star rating, but basically, Jessica Fletcher is going to London to take part in the International Society of Mystery Writers retreat that they have, or conference that they have. And while there, she's visiting her best friend, who's like the #1 mystery writer in the world, if Jessica Fletcher is #2. And while she's there, unfortunately, her friend is murdered. And so she is stuck in London and trying to figure out who murdered her best friend. So that's what the story's about. And just take the charm meter and turn it up to 11, because that's what this book is. I really enjoyed this. And shockingly enough, I'm excited to move on to book 2. Like, Donald Bain is a really good writer, and so I'm excited to see what else he does with this series. I'm interested to have a story take place in Cabot Cove, so that's where she's from, in Maine, just because this was all in London, so I want to see what he does with his hometown and kind of some of the characters that we know from the show. There were 2 that came, the sheriff and her friend whose name I'm forgetting right now, but there were 2 that showed up in London, but mostly it's these other people that I don't know their names or recognize them from the TV series. So I really enjoyed this one. I'm giving Murder, She Wrote, Gin and Daggers by Donald Bain 4 out of 5 stars. All right, so that's going to do it for all of the books that I completed in the month of March. I hope you guys don't mind me kind of stumbling through this a little bit more than maybe usual. I didn't write a whole lot down this time, as you can probably tell, but hopefully my thoughts came through clear enough, I guess. Definitely check out the media wrap-up video that I'm going to be posting sometime next week. I'll talk about all of the movies that I watched and all the video games that I played in the month of March. So, as always, if you guys enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Cinefessions here on YouTube. And if not, thank you anyway for watching. I really appreciate it. All right, let me know what you guys consumed in the month of March, the first month of our lockdown here in the state of Michigan. Did it change your reading habits at all? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to talk to you guys more down there. All right, so I want to say thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.